following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana, and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health using my top 10 sayings for checking in with your best self. This week, we're talking feeling like you matter. And I've got a great guest, clinical psychologist and coach, Dr. Julie Radico, co-author of the upcoming book, You Will Get Through This, a mental health first aid kit, help for depression, anxiety, grief, and more. But first, as usual, a few words from me. You're selfish. A lot of us dread these words, and they were weaponized against us ever since we were young. Or perhaps the trigger word for you is ungrateful or lazy, maybe all of the above or other things that are similar. Yeah, a lot of us grew up in invalidating environments, and that left us with the perception that our self-worth comes from doing things for other people instead of our self-worth meaning we need to look after ourselves. Well, helping other people can give us a temporary sense of satisfaction that's very real. It doesn't give us a sense that we matter just for being ourselves, regardless of what we're producing or providing for other people in that moment. And that inherent sense of self-worth, just as a person, is what helps us get through the really tough times. Self-worth isn't about thinking you're the greatest at anything. No, really, it's not. It's about recognizing that you deserve to feel safe, comfortable, and rested. You're not doing it wrong when you meet your own needs. In fact, it's your job to meet your own needs, or at least figure out how to get your needs met. It also means, journey into self-worth, that you're not a terrible person when you make a mistake. Furthermore, it's about understanding that just because someone said something about you, that doesn't make what they said true. All of this sounds like truism, right? Like platitudes. But it's amazing how many people falter on one or more of these core elements of resiliency. My top 10 phrase is self-esteem cannot exist without self-compassion. And self-compassion is essential to self-worth. Yes, that's a loop. Self-esteem, self-compassion, self-worth, they all reinforce each other. And it's an ongoing journey, not a destination that you just figure out one day and you're set for life. And that disappoints some people when they first hear that the self-esteem, self-compassion, self-worth continuum is an ongoing thing, because I think it's an ongoing struggle. It's not true. What it means is that during the tough times, if you do this ongoing work, you know that there are ways it can get you back to feeling better when you feel bad. Now, this is not something we can entirely do alone. We don't exist in a vacuum. To invoke the cliche, we live in a society. And most of us don't get nearly enough positive reinforcement from others for our good qualities. And I strongly believe that that's an environmental problem that's contributing to the mental health crisis. We hear learn to handle criticism all the time, but a lot of my clients, and me too, we struggle more with handling praise. If someone's prone to being critical, I know I kind of tune them out. I kind of put them on mute in my brain with everything because I don't want to open up. Think they're emotionally safe when they say something nice, only to have them turn back to hurtful criticism, because most of the time, these people, they don't know how to heal what they've hurt, or they don't care to. And so they say something nice to me, I'm just like, whatever, because I have to constantly remind myself, don't get comfortable. they can be back to savagely tearing you down without warning. And while this is a form of self-care, no one can live that way all of the time, just insulating everything, right? We need parts of our social environment that are emotionally safe, where people care about our feelings and respond to signs we're hurt and overwhelmed. That's the exception to the rule, right? Most of us do not have those emotionally safe environments. Again, like I said, social environmental problem. And I really believe we can collectively change this reality. And the first step to that, as hard as it is setting and enforcing your boundaries. Remember, top 10 phrase, other people don't have to like your boundaries. They do have to respect them. If someone calls you names for setting a boundary, that's not respect. If someone knowingly breaks your boundary to test or spite you, that's definitely not respect. And if someone counters with, you say, look, I need you to do this. If they're like, well, fine, do something for me. That's not respecting your boundary. Respecting your boundary is not contingent on you doing something for them first. And yeah, the boundary enforcement gets exhausting. I am currently exhausted by multiple rounds of boundary enforcement of late. Every time you have to set and enforce a boundary, there's that risk that someone makes you the bad guy. They twist what you say. They, go tattle on you to somebody. They twist your words. They blast you on social media. This is all boundary busting behavior. And this is why lately I've been thinking real hard about whether I need so many people around me. Oh God. I've been doing a lot of what I call social spring cleaning of late. Shedding people I either dread dealing with or who only talk to me when they want something. Or those people that are just, I think they're decent people at their core, but they are liabilities. They think before speaking. They say problematic stuff. No, they say outright racist, sexist, transphobic stuff. There's no sugarcoating it. They have work to do. And there's only so long I can just be accepting, right? Sometimes I have to go, no, this is too much. I can't take your damage anymore. And there have been blow-ups. And some of them have been really, really ugly. And some of them have been sad. But the thing is about setting these boundaries and enforcing them, and sometimes that means the person doesn't talk to me anymore. That means I don't have to dread talking to them anymore. It's done. It's a closed book. Personally, I'd rather open hostility than stealth misery. And that is the choice sometimes. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves. How do we start feeling like we matter? That's what my expert guest, Dr. Julie Radico, clinical psychologist and coach, is here to talk about. Julie's the author of a mental health first. You will get through this, a mental health first aid kit, help for depression, anxiety, grief, and more. Julie will be with us after the break. Questions, comments, concerns, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Website's nottherapyshow.com. Join the mailing list while you're there. Fill out the contact form or social media. That Not Therapy Show on X, Instagram, and Threads. I've been better at Threads lately. Go me. Back after this with more Feeling Like You Matter, why it's essential on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kirstner. I'm still not a therapist. And we're still talking Feeling Like You Matter. And it's time for the interview. As promised, I'm here with Dr. Julie Radico. She's a clinical psychologist, but she's also a coach. We love our coaches here. For primarily women who work in helping professions, she's also the co-author of the upcoming book, You Will Get Through This, a mental health first aid kit, help for depression, anxiety, grief, and more, with Nicole Halverson and Charity O'Reilly. Julie, did I get all that right?
Yes, you did.
All right, awesome. Yay. Julie, we're talking about being enough because I had a very interesting conversation with a really good friend of mine recently, and it stuck with me that he says he doesn't believe in intrinsic worth. So let's start there. Why is having a sense that you are enough, to crib from Barbie, or that you have an inherent sense of worth, so important?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And we are all enough.
Mhm.
And having intrinsic value and also recognizing your own values is really kind of like the core of how we have this sense of who we are as we travel around and through the world. There's a type of therapy out there called cognitive behavioral therapy. And part of that is that you think about how like your beliefs about yourself, others, and the world. And so if we walk around the world not thinking that we have intrinsic worth, that we're worthwhile, then we tend to go into our interactions with other people thinking that we aren't valuable enough to be taking their time, or we're not worthwhile enough to seek care when we need it. We also might feel misplaced in the world, like that we're not allowed to take up space or advocate for ourselves. And so it's really important to have a sense that you are valid and you have value, one, just being you, like just existing, human, period. You have value. And then this idea that you are worthwhile because of what you bring to the universe. So you can like change and shape other people's lives in a really positive way. And because of the experiences you've had and how you can relate to others and empathize with others and connect, that really like you have such a chance to make rippling effects of positivity that if you're walking around feeling like you don't have value, don't have worth, I would encourage to seek out a therapist, a psychologist, a coach, somebody who can really help you step back and think about, well, what are my values? How and where do I fall in that? So if I value family and I value being part of a unit, or I value independence and getting to go on adventures, like that part of how you go about doing that and navigating those spaces is that you're allowed to be there. You're allowed to, go take up some space. And so really like challenging maybe the negative thoughts or beliefs that are getting in the way that you don't have just intrinsic value.
Yeah, I do think that that idea of value is connected to core values. He said in the show Top 10 Phrase, core values are more important to relationships and common interests, right? People don't have to love Star Wars as much as I do, as long as they, fundamentally, yes, I see the good in people, right?
Hmm, hmm.
So me and the Kylo Ren fans don't really get along, but that does matter. And a lot of people, I find I primarily work with men, and there's a lot of overlap with what you're saying in your work with women, that they are very achievement driven, that if they're not producing, they don't matter. If you're constantly running on empty, you're not showing up as your best self, but you're also not reading situations well. And I know from my own experiences with burnout, that guilt and shame that you talked about in the article is what blinds us to a lot of the positive feedback we're receiving, right? If you're walking around in guilt, if you're walking around in shame, then every negative is going to amplify 10 times. Every positive is going to be, oh, they're just being nice. So, how do people take those first steps to minimize? It's not going to go away overnight, but how do they take those first steps without biting off more than they can chew, having a setback, and feeling more guilt and more shame instead of less?
Yeah. One distinction, and I'm mindful, like Brene Brown brings this up.
Mm.
So the important distinction between guilt and shame. So guilt is that like I've done something bad, and shame is I
I
am
am
bad.
bad.
Yeah, and this idea of like resonating with what you're saying, like when we carry around shame, we are labeling ourselves, our whole selves, as something bad. Like I'm a
Mhm,
failure, I'm
mhm.
stupid, I'm worthless. And part of, I think, how to like kindly and with some grace, like approach ourselves in the space of noticing what are you saying to yourself? What's your daily monologue that's, running through your mind as this person's walking down the street and they're, if it's this constant judgment, like you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about of like, oh, well, I didn't walk down the street in the right way, or that
Mm-hmm.
person, I don't think they liked me as I walked down the street, or I did that wrong, or I wasn't enough for everybody. Um, you get into the space of labeling yourself as all bad and a failure. So starting to notice that, noticing the like what's the inner monologue? What are you saying to yourself? Is it, oh, I am a mistake, or I made a
Mm-hmm.
mistake? Because they're very different. And then stepping back and saying, okay, well, was that a mistake? And maybe it was because you're human. Great, join the club. We all make mistakes. Can you treat yourself with some like self-compassion of like, is this a learning opportunity? Are there amends to be made? Or, if I'm not perfect, that's okay. And also with this point you make about refilling your cup. So, I work with a lot of individuals who tend to put themselves last, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of similar to what you're saying. And it's kind of like society puts out these messages that you need to be super mom or super professional, like, or you need to, if you're in the helping field like a physician or
Mm-hmm.
a teacher, you got to put yourself last, otherwise you're selfish in some kind of way. And we internalize these like beliefs that are really insidious and unhelpful and breed things like anxiety and depression. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so recognizing what is it that I just said to myself. So the one of the strategies that is talked about in therapy, but is also really, really helpful in like coaching, is when you notice that you're going throughout your day and your mood shifts negatively.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I don't know why, I don't know what was going on, but I just went from feeling okay to feeling really bad. And ask yourself, pause and say, what was just going through my mind? What was I just
Mm-hmm.
thinking? And see if you can't identify, what are you saying to yourself? Did the phrase, oh, I messed that up, come through your head? Or, oh, I don't think they like me. Or, oh, I should have done that differently. The tyranny of the shoulds, the saying that hopefully your
Mm-hmm.
listeners will find helpful is like, don't should all over yourself. Um,
I
right? So
I ban the word should from my clients. Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
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 So notice that shift in your mood, catch what it is that you're saying to yourself, and then see if there's something unhelpful in it. And if you can't reframe it, think about it differently. So this is like right from the textbook of like cognitive behavioral therapy of like, we fall into these traps. Can you notice and gently say to yourself, well, yeah, I made a mistake. I'm still worthwhile and I can
Uh-huh.
learn from that and I can grow, right? That it's not the be all end all. I made this mistake and now I have no intrinsic value. Like those two do not connect, and if we think that they do, that's a good time to really like reach out to your support system, reach out to, people who can help you in the professional realm,
Mhm.
because those are the kinds of insidious things that like slowly chip away at your self-worth and make you feel really like defeated and
Mhm.
lonely. Everybody has worth. So nobody needs to feel like they don't. And if I could, hope that your listeners take anything away from this, it's that you are worthwhile just by being. And, talk to the people that you need to, get the strategies you need to so that you really understand that and believe that and can carry that through your day.
Mhm. And it's funny because I've got a few clients who have done so many rounds of kind of disjointed CBT, and they've sort of warped it
Mm,
on it at, oh, I'm supposed to be logical and I'm supposed to challenge my assumptions. Well, having worth is an assumption. How can I prove that I have worth? And
mm,
it's like,
mm,
okay, so whatever happened there did the surface level thing without examining those underlying feelings of, I don't deserve to have feelings. If I feel bad, I'm doing something wrong. I'm a burden to everyone around me. If I make a mistake, well, that's on me. I'm not allowed to be a complicated, messy, not makey sensey, sometimes human. So, how do you prevent that trap? Because that's something we're finding with CBT, which is great. But with people with deep underlying trauma, it does take that left turn at Albuquerque.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a fantastic point. And I resonate with the fact that CBT is not the be all end all.
Yeah.
And so bringing in like other components of you could think about it as other strategies. So like there's dialectical behavior therapy that often can be helpful for people who've experienced trauma or people who are dealing with certain like personality disorder types of things, where it brings in some more of the like emotional like groundedness. Other things to consider are so Kristen Neff has some great work about self-compassion, and this idea it brings in accepting yourself as you are and your feelings as they happen, and also the idea and the practice of mindfulness, that sometimes our feelings, they just happen, they just are, and there's not a great explanation of like, oh, you can explain everything away, or like, you know, getting into the weeds of, well, I'm worthwhile is an assumption. You know, building evidence around positive assumptions can still be helpful. I'm also mindful when we talk about, you know, like kind of feeling like we need to be more rooted in ourselves and recognizing the different parts of ourselves that feel uncomfortable with like thinking rationally. So there's like internal family systems work, IFS, and that brings in different, literally different parts of yourself. And so the,
managers, firefighters.
Yeah, you got it. So like
yeah.
in the layperson terms, right? So, you know, that there are these different parts of yourself that have come up over the years to really trying to like protect you. And some of those are things that are trying to protect you from the shame and the guilt, right? And so they're not thinking they're doing anything bad, but your manager part is like, oh, we can't feel this right now because we're on a podcast. So like, let's get out of the way, you know? So those types of things, you know, when our rational mind, when the cognitive part of our mind is hard to really like feel like we can feel valid and accept that we are and we are okay and we are like valuable as we are, then tapping into more of like the behavioral stuff, like the mindfulness stuff, and also the like emotional piece and the parts of yourself that need to be heard in that space. And so there's a lot of I'm mindful that that's a lot of different jargon, and so trying to really like lay, you know, term all that stuff, but I encourage people, like, some of this stuff feels like, you know, super gobbledygook, and it's like, look into things and like ask for help when you need it, but also make sense of what feels true for you, because there's nobody that I would sit coach with, therapy with, anything that I would be like, it has to be this, it has to be CBT or nothing. If it doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't connect with you, it doesn't feel right for you, that is valid. And it's like, you trying to fit you into a box is not going to be helpful. So, you know, making sense of there's other modalities, there's other treatments. And also sometimes it's connecting. I've worked with people who are like, I just need time to like literally be in nature. I need to like get back to the fact that like we are humans, but we were like, you know, we're on Earth just in the way everything else is on Earth, and like we're connected to it in some way. But me driving to work every day and going about my day, like I am disconnected to the nth degree, and I need time to just sit and be and pay attention. So like, what do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you like feel physically? And that just being able to take up space in that kind of way shows that you have value. It also connects back to what you're saying earlier of needing to refill your cup. So people do that in lots of different ways, and it's going to look unique. For some people, refilling your cup is, you know, watching superhero movies. Some it's playing video games. Some it's talking to your friends. Some of it is sitting in a room silently alone.
Right.
Great.
Like, while
totally
playing video
great.
games and watching superhero movies. I feel called out. I did feel called out by the article talking about the superhero thing. And that is a great tease to hold us over through the break. Come back. How ideas of being a superhero go into not feeling like you matter. What? Yeah, you're not going to want to miss this. Dr. Julie Radico is the guest, co-author of You Will Get Through This, a mental health first aid kit, coming out in June when we come back on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We're still talking Feeling Like You Matter, Tips for Feeling Like You Matter. And Dr. Julie Radico, co-author of the upcoming book coming out in June, You Will Get Through This, a mental health first aid kit. We were talking about the article she wrote where she's like, you are not a superhero. And I felt so called out. What I realized, because I'd internalized all that stuff, is I looked at the families of superheroes. You know, the girlfriends are dying or they're leaving them and they're missing family events and they always expect everyone to just understand, and nobody can stand that person who was never around, who is never reliable, who always cancels last minute or just doesn't show up. Nobody likes a ghoster, right? And that is all right. If you want to be that guy or that gal whose personal life is a disaster, well, you're out doing great things for other people, okay, follow that path. But if you want work-life balance, if you want some harmony, if you want some satisfaction, you got to be Clark Kent more than Superman. And I noticed that a lot of female superheroes don't have a secret identity. They have to be that all the time. And this is what I run into with people is from the beginning, from their families, they have been taught an obedient child is a good child. Do what you're told. Don't ask for anything. And yes, we all get that in childhood. We all need to learn the structures. We all need to learn the rules. But that process of individuating from our parents and becoming our own thinking individuals is become more and more fraught. And a lot of people don't get there. And so what I get from people is, well, I have to be selfless. I have to knock myself out or I'll get guilted by my mother. My dad will make some crummy comment. You know, my brother or my sister will take a dig at me. And that's really real. How do you get people to start doing it anyway?
That's yes.
Yeah.
So we live in systems, and the systems always want to go back to a comfortable set, like functioning.
Yep.
So if you are in a system where you are the caretaker and you have been taught to be obedient, you've been taught to not make waves, you've been taught to do for others and to put yourself last, then when you try to change, the system is going to react. People are going to react in that system. And it could be for a whole host of reasons. It could be like, oh, does this mean that person doesn't love me anymore because they want to take time on their own? Or that can mean like, how dare they try to take time on their own? It also can be like, well, I don't know how to do this stuff on my own. There's all these reasons that aren't always like nefarious. And that person who, you know, if mom wants to say, well, you know what, I'm going to take time for myself one night a week and go to a Zumba class, whatever it might be, you know, that partner at home, that kid at home, whoever it might be saying, I need help. I need mom. And they're not doing it to be a villain necessarily, but that's just what they know. And systems want to go back to their default setting. So it can feel really hard to take space for yourself if you have already set up these routines where your relationships are that, oh, you know, dad's always going to do that for me. I know he's always going to, I don't have to do that for myself. And so, you know, whomever it is in the family knows that I don't have to because they're going to do it. Even in work environments, you know, oh, so-and-so always cleans up after the meeting or sets up the meeting for us or always like leads us off in some way, or will take on the grunt kind of work that nobody else wants. Once those patterns form, it's really uncomfortable for those, like for the people around you when you're trying to set healthy boundaries to then like be okay with those changes. Doesn't mean you don't make them. Just means that exactly what you're saying, like it's uncomfortable. And so one of those things that I think is really important when you are saying, I need to refill my cup, I need to take time, I'm running on empty and now I'm going to get burnout and I can't function at all then. Like now I'm going to do nothing for anybody because I'm done. I have to quit my job, or I'm just going to like, you know, sit on the couch and do absolutely nothing. Is to remind yourself, like to, again, check in with what are you thinking? What's popping up in your mind that's telling you like, oh, it's bad for me to take care of myself, and reminding yourself of things like you matter too. Self-care can actually kind of help you take care of the people around you. So it's not a selfish thing to take care of yourself and to set boundaries, because you knowing if I say no to this one thing, it's actually going to help me be able to do this other thing or two other things that are more valuable to everybody in this group.
Hmm.
Um, that's important. So you deciding and recognizing that you're worthy of care, you're worthy of taking up space, and that you can't help anybody if you're running on empty. Those are things to really coach yourself with. Also, build allies. So the
Hmm.
people in those systems, again, they're not always villains. They're not always like, oh, you know, so and so is not doing this for me anymore. They must be terrible and heartless. They might be just confused. And if they
Right.
knew that you were trying to set a healthy boundary, they might resonate with that and be like, oh, I had no idea that this was like the 18th thing on your plate and the plate is now overflowing. I thought it was like the one of two things on your plate. Let me help. So you don't have to be a martyr or a hero. Ask for help.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize how much other people don't know
Mm,
about what they're going through. And, it's a good rule of thumb to assume everybody's going through something.
mm,
But yeah, people feel like they're, again, a burden if they ask for things.
mm,
And then they're terrified of that word. I hear the word selfish. You dropped it. I hear the word selfish come up a lot. And that first 10% of change, that's so hard because, like you said, they try to make a change, they get a bad reaction. Whoa, that was bad. I'm not doing that again. How do people take those first steps into it's okay if someone calls me selfish?
mm. Yeah, that's a fantastic question. This comes back to, I think, full circle in the start of our conversation is recognizing your intrinsic value.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea that having a phrase or an item or something that is going to ground you in your recognition that you are valuable. And so maybe it's, you're looking at, or thinking about something that you achieved before, or, somebody that you took care of and helped before. Great. Totally fine if it's connected to another person. In this way, that might be like an okay place to start, because if it's hard to say I have value just as me, then there is evidence that you clearly are valuable to other people, right? Others wouldn't be so upset that you are not sharing your value with them if you were not providing
Mm-hmm.
value, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why
Mm-hmm.
would I care if you stopped helping me and doing things for me if you weren't somehow giving value, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like building your self-esteem in ways of saying like, what is it that you can think about or do that grounds you in the fact that you have worth? So, and like, again, it can look like anything. I'm worthwhile because I got up this morning, and because I took
Right.
care of myself, and because I pet my cat, and because like that being worthwhile doesn't mean I had to do great grand things. And the self-esteem, I kindly gently nudge people to recognize that if you, as human beings, if you think about when you were born, you wouldn't look at a baby and say you have no value. You would look at
Right.
that baby and you would say, oh great, adorable, you have value
Mm-hmm.
because you're here, we're
Right.
glad you're here. You have learned things throughout your travels over the years that have stripped away from you having self-esteem in a healthy way. And so going back to the basic of, because I'm here, I have
Mm-hmm.
value, and I may have learned things that have stripped that away. How can I relearn and give myself some care to say, nope, I have that value. Because I'm here, I have value. And what's one thing that you can do for yourself to take care of yourself today? That is a way of building your
Mm-hmm.
self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
What's one thing that you can do for another person that you choose to do that's going to help refill your cup? That's a way to build self-esteem. What's something that you can do to like enjoy, like to learn, to nerd out, right? So
Right.
just the fact that you have autonomy, you can do things, that you're worthwhile. That's so I think like we make it really complicated of like you have to build self-esteem by like
Yeah.
writing down all these things and building evidence and yes, but it can be really, really basic. The fact that you like were able to do anything positive for
Right.
yourself others in the world, like anything, or that you made a connection, that you invested in yourself in some way. And whether that
Mm-hmm.
was just getting out of bed or sitting up in bed or sending
Mm-hmm.
a text to a friend, because somebody responding to a text, wow, yeah, they took time out of their day to
Yeah.
respond to me, even if it was just like a little like heart on my text or a little
Right.
thumbs up, right? But that is something, if you spend your time ignoring those bits of evidence, it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to build your self-esteem.
That's right.
So make space for that. Recognize that it doesn't have to be, oh, I got the Nobel Prize, so now I can have all the self-esteem, right? Only like 0.000% if somebody wins the Nobel Prize. Like it's minuscule. So if that's the bar, we're all failing.
Right.
So set the bar as low as it can possibly go in the most self-compassion way, that like doing anything for yourself is evidence in the bucket that you are worthwhile, and it should be building your self-esteem.
Yeah.
Giving
Yeah.
yourself the benefit of the doubt, trying something new, learning something, all of this stuff is because you are valuable and valid. And it can sound like kind of like cheesy, but it's
Yeah.
true. It's very much like we get into this headspace of society tells us we have to be contributing and
Right.
earning and producing, and that's what society has told us is valuable. Like you're only
Right.
valuable as somebody in your profession if you're like making me money and doing all this, right? But that's not what humans, that's what we're doing, but that's not why humans are born. We don't look at a baby and go, great, make me money. Like, right? We say, oh, you're valuable because you're here. And
Right.
so remembering that.
Yeah, I you mentioned cats, and cats are the masters of
Mm,
I matter, right? People are
yes.
obsessed with cat videos because what are they? A cat sleeping on a package of barbecue sauce.
Hmm.
Cat jumps up here, sticks his butt in my face while I'm talking to a client. That cat is worth it. They are
Hmm.
the masters of, yes, I am here and I am worth it. And I love that. That whole thing about getting out of bed when it's hard was exactly where I started when I
Mm.
was, in PTSD therapy. Is like anything, any achievement whatsoever. I brushed my teeth when I didn't want to. I got out of
Mhm.
bed when I did. It's the fact that it's hard. It's the
Mhm.
fact that it took effort. Um,
Mhm.
one of the things I say to people, if they don't want to bother someone, right, or they don't want to inconvenience somebody, I say to them, would you want someone to not tell you when you were bothering them? Would you want somebody to just have to feel like they had to be with you, not that they wanted to be with you? And they'd say, no. And I said, then why are you expecting people to do it to you?
Sometimes it's really hard for us to see value in ourselves and build our own self-esteem. So a great question, like you're saying, is if someone you cared about was having the same
Mhm.
negative thought that you were, or was saying the same negative thing to themselves that you are, what would you say to them? So
Mhm.
taking yourself out of the equation sometimes, and also like you're saying, would you want that loved one to be like sitting on their own and stewing on their own and feeling worse and worse, and they could have just reached out and you would have helped them? Would you want them not to reach out to you? You would feel so bad if you were like, you could have just said, I need help, I need support. So fantastic.
Mhm.
Yes.
Julie, what is your book about? You will get through this, a mental health first aid kit. What can people expect when it comes out in July?
As a psychologist, so I worked in family medicine, so like primary care
Hmm.
for about a decade. And one of the things that I started to notice again and again is that people would come in for help, and they would start to tell me, well, I saw this thing on TikTok that I tried.
Hmm.
Or I, heard this thing from a friend, or yeah, I tried that, but it didn't really work. If you're talking about some evidence-based treatment. So one of the things that I found myself doing repeatedly was sharing what does the evidence say? What does the research say? What are some like
Hmm.
concrete, specific ways that if you're struggling with grief, or you're dealing with chronic pain, what are the things that like a doctor of psychology, what might I say to you in those moments? And I really wanted to, my colleagues and I, we wanted to like get that information into people's hands, that it's not like you have to like wait 3 months for an appointment and then like have somebody tell you a little bit of what the research says, and then you go back and you have to wait for another appointment. I really wanted to say, okay, you're dealing with depression, and the things I'm highlighting are different chapters in the book. You're dealing
Hmm.
with maybe depression. All right, this is what the research says. These are the symptoms you might be experiencing. This is what the research says of like how prevalent it is, that you're not alone in this,
Right.
but also what does the research say? And in very bite-sized, understandable terms. Like we made it so it's not gobbledygook that like, when you read a research article and it's like, wow, they tried to make this hard to understand.
Oh my brain feels like it's coming out here. I read some of these papers. They're all reflexive language. Yes, you
Yes.
have to because it's reverse correlation, but they try to
Yes.
make people
100%.
get it wrong. Oh
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
goodness. All
I
right.
feel like that's what graduate school was a big part for me, was learning how to read and then also then write in the weird, like, okay, nobody talks like this kind of language. So in our book, we don't talk like that. We have translated the information to say, oh, you know what? Do this. This is what the research says. Do this simple thing a couple times a day, and it could actually help with your pain. And then we have case examples, so people will come away with knowing that this is what it might look like in real life. And then also for each chapter, we've got some ways. So if you're dealing with body image difficulties, that's one of the chapters, you would have a sense of how you might bring up that conversation, start that conversation with a loved one, like if you're dealing with it yourself, but then also if a loved one is dealing with that, what are some ways that you might approach in a gentle way to start conversations, some things you might consider. And then we have resources for people to keep reading, because we've got 26 chapters and they are, lots of great understandable bite-sized information. There's always more to read. And so we have some like, what are the like main resources you really want to know? What do we go to as like psychologists and therapists? Like if I was going to, again, you showed up in my clinic or you showed up in like a coaching session with me, what am I going to tell you? I'm going to say, hey, this person's really good to read. Go read them. That this is really understandable and might help you. And so that the book compiles all of that in a really like streamlined, understandable way, so that we're not the gatekeepers of this helpful knowledge. We want you to have it in your hands. So again, because you're worthwhile and you're valuable and you can take care of yourself, and it's still great for you to reach out for a coach, therapist. All of that is totally part of one of the things we mentioned in the book, right? It's like, we're not giving you therapy through this book, but we want you to know, well, what might I consider? And you might be dealing with depression and anxiety at the same time. And we talk about how those might overlap, and that like, there's nuances to what you're experiencing. So still reach out for help, but also here's something to get you started as you wait those 3 months for an appointment. And we also, I'll highlight this, the last section. So the last about 5 chapters of the book are navigating the mental health like realm in the States, in the United States, but like it's like, how do you find a therapist?
Right.
How do you how does insurance work? How do you navigate like all of these spaces? But also, one of the things we're like most proud of with this book, and I chuckle because like as a psychologist and we're all like psychologists, therapists, the co-authors, we write about how do you break up with your therapist, because all therapists are not made equal, and they ethically, morally, are all trying to do good stuff, but for all the best reasons, that therapist might not be your therapist, and you can break up with them. Go find a different therapist. Don't give up on therapy altogether, because there's still value in it. But you don't have to stay with somebody that you're like, I'm not getting anything out of it. Like you were talking about, like if CBT is not hitting the mark,
right,
don't do CBT.
Yeah, it sounds like it's also a great resource to let people know, did your therapist make a mistake? Even if it's a great practice of therapy, they might not have had a good therapist. And it sounds like your book gives people confidence to navigate the system like they matter.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, we have come full circle. Julie Radico, thanks so much. Check out Julie's book that she has co-authored with Nicole Halverson and Charity O'Reilly. You will get through this, a mental health first aid kit, help for depression, anxiety, grief, and more. You can go to theexperimentpublishing.com, and it has all the links for the book in the summer catalog. I believe you can pre-order it.
Yes,
I see the pre-order link on Amazon. Yeah, Julie, I'm stoked for this book. I'm going to get it. This is awesome. Thank you so much for coming on It's Not Therapy.
Thank you.
All right. Questions, comments, anything at all, nottherapyshow.com or at nottherapy on social media. When we come back, more evidence that you matter on It's Not Therapy. The following following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We're in the closing minutes of our show about feeling like you matter. And I want to give some more examples of what Dr. Julie Radico was talking about before the break in setting the bar low for the things that give you value. And at first it felt so low, it was pathetic for me when I first started trauma therapy. But the more I've done this work, the more I've realized the little things, that low bar, it's not so little. Let me show you what I mean. I want to drill down on something Julie said. Because I'm here, I have value. That is an abstract that may ring hollow, but look at these examples. Supported someone while they were going through a hard time, stood by them when other people abandoned them. You matter. That's not small. You listen to someone's problems without judgment. You matter. That's not small. You helped a friend move. That is certainly not small. You mattered. Pet sitting? God send, even if you don't believe in God. You matter. Rides to the airport. Enough. Have you seen how much that costs? You matter. You moderated someone's Discord forum or message board or helped them approve social media comments. You matter. That is not small. Volunteering is not small. So many of us need volunteers. You volunteered for anything. Volunteer at a soup kitchen. Not just that. Helped your friend run their dance recital. Volunteered to take somebody's relative to a movie. Anything. That is not small. That is human contact. You matter. Supported a YouTuber by hitting that like button. May seem like a small thing. I put my content on YouTube. That is not a small thing. You matter. When you subscribe to a podcast, you matter. When you listen to this radio show, you matter. We are nothing without our listeners. When you cooked a meal, ran an errand, picked up a few things around the house, you did that. That's one thing that doesn't have to get done anymore. You matter. Do you see how it works? When you reframe how big or small something is, you realize that the people that matter the most to you, the people who made the biggest positive impact on you, weren't the famous people that we all put up on pedestals or tear down from those pedestals. They're the people in your life that did the small, meaningful things when it counted. And you can do that too. Make sense? All right. Questions, comments, concerns, Liana at nottherapyshow.com, or just go to nottherapyshow.com, fill up the comment form, join our mailing list, or add Not Therapy on X, that's Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. I've been better with social media lately, and I'm better at time, too. Remember, until next time, your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. Talk soon. Remember, you matter. You really matter. Really, really, you matter. Okay, I'll stop now.